My golden child brother stole my car and crashed it while driving drunk. My parents took his side and the situation escalated until my father ended up in jail. My golden child brother stole my car and crashed it while driving drunk. My brother Dave has always been our family's golden child and was never made to take responsibility for his actions. He could get away with everything he did because our parents always stood up for him, and he never faced consequences for things like purposefully ruining my homework or stealing my belongings. Our parents treating him this way made him think he could do whatever he wanted, and recently he begged me to let him borrow my car. I said no because I didn't want him driving it. After all, he had already crashed 3 of his own cars by age 21. Unsurprisingly, he disregarded what I said and went behind my back to take my car anyway. He did this while drunk during a Christmas party, and while driving my car got into an accident. Thinking he could get another get-out-of-jail-free card, he called my parents in an extremely panicked state, begging them to come help him out. He explained that he crashed the car because he couldn't handle the icy roads, and he wasn't used to a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So my parents, uncle, and I got into my parents' minivan and followed the tracker device I had installed in case this exact thing happened. We found Dave by the road and my car nose deep in a snow-filled ditch. My uncle was furious at him because he had given me this car, and it was formerly a car of his police department, and I was mad at Dave for stealing my car again because he had actually done this already. He just didn't crash it the first time. Anyway, my parents of course wanted me to let it go, but I said enough was enough and I was going to call police. Dave begged me not to because he really had been drinking before he set off and would get a DUI. I said he was going to pay me back for my damned car then, or I'd sue him. Well, for once in his life, fortune did not favor him, and the police were already aware of the accident and were driving in to check on the scene. A divine intervention, I guess. My parents actually had the audacity to say that I was the one driving the car, and they were just there to help me. I said that wasn't true, and my uncle backed me up. In fact, one of the cops that was there recognized my uncle and they had a chat. Then they went to Dave and asked to see his license, which I then found out was suspended after he'd crashed his previous car. Then they breath tested him. He wound up with cuffs slapped in his wrists, while my mother was crying and begging the police not to take him away. But the officer just said that she and my dad could get arrested too for lying to the police. That shut my parents up, and we got back in the minivan. The Christmas party was ended early, and my parents drove me and my uncle home since he rode with me. They didn't say much to either of us the whole drive, and just sped away as soon as we were out of their van. They nearly slipped off the road themselves doing that. My brother was let out of jail the next day, and he looked so scared that he was practically crying. The cops there had roughed him up a bit while talking about prison and the things they'd seen go on there. Dave had actually peed himself during that out of fear, and they let him take a shower. That's when my uncle started cracking up and revealed to us that his friends in the department never filed the DUI and just the charge for the suspended license, which was about a $600 fine. My uncle said he just wanted to teach Dave a lesson, and this would be the one and only time he'd ever get his help. Dave then apologized to me and said he'd pay to have my car fixed and would never touch it again. When it got pulled out of the ditch, the front end damage was actually minor. It needs a new front bumper, a headlight, and a grille. The damage was just superficial, thankfully. My parents have pretty much glossed over the whole incident and act like it didn't happen. Update. A lot of crazy stuff went down yesterday. My brother promised he'd pay for the damage to my car, and he kept that promise. The body shop guy cut me a deal at a fair price for replacing the damaged front-end parts on my car. My brother willingly paid cash in advance to the body shop after getting the quote from them. He seemed all too eager to hand the money over and politely bid me goodbye. I won't say how much it was, but it definitely hurt his savings, especially after the fine he had to pay for driving without a license. He was wanting to get a replacement car, but he won't have one till his license suspension is over anyway, and I don't know when that'll be, but I think it's gonna be a good while. Anyway, my parents had given my brother a ride to the body shop, and as soon as he was out the door, they stayed and admonished me for making him spend all his money fixing my car. I imagine they were about to say something about how I should have just lent my car to him to begin with, and how this all would have been prevented if I had, but something in me snapped, and I cut them off, and that's when it spilled out. I called them out on everything that came to mind. All of the favoritism, how they act like my brother has always been more important, how I had to move in with my uncle just to escape their unfair treatment, how they let my brother steal my car, and then tried to lie to me until I threatened police, how they themselves tried to lie to police by saying I was the one driving when my brother crashed my car, and so much more. And I ended it all with saying how stupid it was that they were mad at me for making my brother pay for the damage that he caused by stealing my car on Christmas Day and driving it without a license, and while intoxicated. By the time I finally stopped, I was nearly out of breath. I felt like Eminem during the rap God Fast part. My mother was crying. My father was red in the face and looked like he was about to explode. Then he just took my mother by the hand and started to walk out. But some guy I don't know who was sitting near the door blurted out, "You guys are narcissists." Well, that was enough to set my father over the edge as he started attacking the guy. They got into a scuffle, and unfortunately for the guy, it did not end well. My father is not a small man, 6'4" and 240 pounds, and he knows how to throw a punch. So he started laying his hands on the poor guy like a mad gorilla until the guy was on the ground taking it. I yelled for the clerk to call the cops, and they did. My father heard that and bolted out the door and drove off, but not before kicking the guy one final time like it was some cartoon. He actually left my mother behind, crying in the lobby. He wanted to get away that fast. Police had to pick him up at home home because the CCTV footage caught his face very clearly, and he surprisingly cooperated when he was arrested. But he's looking at charges for assault. The guy he laid hands on suffered a very swollen black eye and a possible broken nose and concussion. You see, when I was a little girl, I always imagined my dad doing something like that to protect me from something. But seeing him do it as a response to getting called out by me was deeply hurtful. The man who was supposed to protect me couldn't face the truth as to how he treated me and resorted to violence. That hurts. Anyways, I was there when they were loading the guy. My father knuckle-sandwiched into the ambulance to get him to the hospital. My mother has called me crying and blaming herself. My uncle is saying it was about time my dad tasted some karma. And my brother is doing everything he can to stay out of it. This is not how I thought this was all going to go down. Update 2. Well, my father is out of jail now, and I'm told he looks like crap. My mother paid his bail, and he came out looking nearly as bad as what he did to the guy he attacked. Apparently, he picked a fight while in jail over the weekend with 3 different people at once and got swarmed by them. My uncle went with my mother when my father was let out and said that my father didn't try to blame anything on me. In fact, he barely talked. Just got in the minivan with my mother and went home. It was clear that his pride was very much bruised. I know this to be true. I remember on countless occasions him talking about how he could take multiple guys on in a fight at once. Anyway, I did manage to get in contact with the guy my father laid hands on in the shop. A friend of a friend knows him. I'll call him Dan for the sake of telling this. My father roughed Dan up pretty bad. He's got a concussion from his head hitting the wall after taking several blows. His nose was indeed bent. He's in a neck brace too, and he spent 2 days in the hospital. When I asked him what his plans were, he confirmed he is indeed going to be suing my father and has already spoken to a lawyer. I told him to do what he has to do, and that there is no way I will be standing up for my father after what he did, and after how poorly he has treated me his entire life. My friends and I actually put together a gift basket for Dan, and we each put some money into it since he's not going to be able to go to work for a while. My uncle even contributed, even though he didn't have to. Dan was very thankful when we presented it to him. My mother hasn't tried to call or text me since my father was released, but my brother has told me through texts that she's still been crying a bit, and my father has remained pretty much silent since he got home and hardly leaves the couch. Apparently, he's extremely scared of facing a lengthy prison sentence. The last time my father was like this, he didn't speak to anyone for at least a week, but this situation is way worse than what made him go silent last time, because last time he just lost $500 on sports betting. Update 3. It's been months, but the guy my father laid hands on is doing fine now. Other than needing to have his nose fixed, the rest of his wounds healed fine, and he is in normal condition. He did go through with it and filed a lawsuit against my parents, and my father was initially stubborn as an ox about it and was dead set on fighting it because he actually thought that he could get away with it, but he ended up changing his mind. Why? Well, for multiple reasons. The first one being someone in the middle of the night broke several of the windows on my parents' minivan. My uncle says that the police were pretty sure it was done with a BB gun. No culprit was found, but there was a note attached to it that stated that this was for Dan. My father replaced the windows on the van himself, as he's done it before, and no one has vandalized the vehicle since. The next thing was my father was told by a lawyer that he had no chance of winning in court. There was CCTV footage, multiple witnesses, including myself, and no judge in their right mind would want to listen to my father, especially because he already has a criminal record. Nothing major, but it's a major factor in court. The last thing that made him change his mind was that my mother threatened to divorce him if he didn't face the consequences of his actions, like a man, and I guess that was enough for him to finally surrender in mediation before the lawsuit went to full court. He settled with the guy he laid hands on in the mechanic shop for the cover of all hospital bills, extra money for time off work, emotional damage, other reimbursements, and the total amount has added up to over $12,000. My father also has been forced to go to anger management as part of the agreement. I've only seen him a few times the past few months, and it's pretty obvious he's still mad at me because he avoids looking at me and constantly looks mad whenever I do see him. But after everything that's happened, he no longer has a way to justify his anger, not even to himself. He just sits quietly and fumes inside. He's also apparently cut back on drinking a lot, probably because that's one less expense he and my mother would have to deal with. And due to the settlement, they are rather short on money. Now on to my brother. You may be pleased to hear that he's been working hard to mend things with me. He's moved out of our parents' house and in with a friend. He's got his license back, but no car as he can't afford one yet and hasn't actually asked me to borrow mine. Instead, he's been riding a bike to get to work. His relationship with our parents is more strained now, though. After a while, our father started turning his ire on my brother. He finally started blaming him for all of the things that happened over the holidays, and our mother had to make him calm down. He's a lot calmer now since he started going to anger management, I will say that, but it's obvious he still hates me. But it's not like my parents are offering to do family therapy or couples therapy with each other, and I suspect the reason why is because my father doesn't want more people telling him he's wrong. My mother, brother, and uncle all agree with that too. My father is still employed somehow, and my mother says he wants to get a denture made at the dentist for his missing teeth after getting roughed up in jail. Yeah, turns out he lost more than one tooth after getting out of jail. It was just one initially, but several of his upper teeth were already in bad shape and over time got more loose and loose, and he had to have several of them pulled. So he's missing 6 teeth on the upper left side of his mouth now and the front 2 as well.